Now, this time yesterday, we asked you to decide what story we should be covering. We've called it Sunrise on Demand, and thousands of people took to Twitter and Facebook and the Soapbox to have their say.
Now, the story you voted for was the church's opposition to same-sex marriage, so let's talk about it. We're joined by Jim Wallace in Perth from the Australian Christian Lobby and gay marriage advocate and former Australian Medical Association President Dr Karen Phelps in Sydney. Morning to you both there. Jim, let's start with you. Why is the church so opposed to same-sex marriage?
Well, Koshi, the reality is that the scriptures are very clear about the fact that Jesus and, you know, when people become a Christian, it's an individual and a personal experience, but from that point on we try to live more like Jesus would want us to, and certainly in the scriptures it's very clear that he wouldn't ordain homosexual marriage. Now, the reason, though, is couched in the natural, and that is that whether you believe that God created nature or whether you believe that there was nothing, it all exploded and then there was everything, the reality is that in this issue that it still takes the involvement of a man and a woman to create a child, and therefore we have nature prescribing that a man and a woman should be involved in the creation of a child and should be involved in the nurturing of that child as its natural order. And I find it absolutely amazing that at a time in our history when we're jumping through hoops to try to make sure that every tree on the planet has its natural environment so it can flourish, that we would be challenging the definition of marriage, which creates exactly that environment for a child, requiring that it's between a man and a woman and that they should live to the exclusion of all others and for as long as they both shall live.
Okay, so that's one side. Karen, what's your response? And given that not everybody gets married in order to have children.
I think there are some important points that have been raised here, and the first is that when you talk about the church opposing same-sex marriage, it's only one part of one church that is opposing same-sex marriage. There are a number of religions that support same-sex marriage who have actually come out in favour. There are a number of clergymen within the Christian faith who have actually come out in favour of marriage equality. So this is by no means unanimous amongst the religions. The second thing is that religion and state really should be kept separate where this is concerned. I think if the religions want to keep discriminating, for example, against divorced couples and not marry them, or against same-sex couples in terms of having their religious ceremonies around marriage, then that's up to them. What this is about is legal protection for a relationship between two people. When it comes to procreation, I think we also have to separate marriage and procreation, because, as you said, you don't have to be married to procreate. You don't have to procreate to raise children, because a lot of children are adopted. We have a lot of children who are not being raised by their biological mother and father in a case where parents have been divorced, and there is co-parenting with step-parents involved. There are a lot of children who are being born into same-sex relationships, and those children deserve for their parents to have the same rights, and for those children, particularly when it comes to inheritance law, to have the same rights as children who have a biological mother and father. And also I think it needs to be said that in Australia now, this year, it is in a minority for children to be living in the household with their biological mother and father. And so I think when it comes to procreation, we also need to look at the fact that we allow postmenopausal women, infertile men, people who have no intention of having sex, people who have no intention of having children to marry. And so the whole procreation argument really falls apart fairly rapidly.
Right.
Well, I'd just like to challenge those points. I mean, first of all, there's very much a minority of Christian churches or people of faith who would agree with Karen that marriage should not be other than between a man and a woman. I took, we took into the Parliament the other day an endorsed document by over 50 churchmen from right across the evangelical, the Pentecostal, the Catholic and the Orthodox divide. Now, you can't get broader than that and broader support for this fact. And I'd also say that Karen is also
the marriage
trying
equality
to perpetuate
advocates
here,
took a similar
trying
petition
to
with the same number of
Can I
signatures.
finish, please? can I... no, that wasn't the one at all, Karen. And Karen is also trying to perpetuate here the myth that there is some way, some discrimination against homosexual people. That is simply not true, and particularly in the issue of transfer of property, testate law, that is simply not true. There is no discrimination. There were 54 pieces of legislation, or sorry, 85 pieces of legislation amended, which guaranteed exactly the same rights to homosexual couples as to heterosexual couples. But the reality is here, we're about holding up an aspirational model in society, which government has the right to do to make sure that children, sure that children can flourish in the same way we are demanding for trees.
Okay. Just quickly, Karen, just quickly,
so we balance it up.
The religions that agree with same-sex marriage?
Yes, there are a number of religions that agree with marriage equality, Reform Judaism being one of them, and there are a number of Christian clergy who have actually said that they are in support of same-sex marriage. Right. I think it's important that we see this as a legal situation, a legal contract recognised under the law, and separate state from church in this political argument. It really isn't about one brand of religion.
Yeah. It is a very passionate subject. We thank you both for your time this morning. We'll have to leave it there, but again, appreciate your time.
Thanks very much, Mel.
Look, this is a segment you're in charge of, and it will be happening again tomorrow. So let's take a look at the choices for Wednesday.